Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to call to order the January 12, 2009 City Council Redevelopment Agency of the City of San Carlos. And the first item is the Pledge of Allegiance. Why don't we stand, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. All right. Thank you. Next item is item 2, changes to the order of agenda. Staff, City Council. All right. Seeing no changes there. Move on to item 3, report from closed session. Mr. Rubens.
No report tonight from closed session.
Right. No report. Item number 4, council communications and announcements. Mr. Grocott.
Yeah, I have a couple. One is, since this is our first meeting with the new mayor officially, and I sit on the fire board, I just want everybody to know, and especially the other council members, Bob goes quick, so you got to stick with him, and everything will be fine. New pace tonight. I wanted to comment on item 8G that's on our consent calendar, only because it talks about amending the government code section. I'm not pulling the item, but it does talk about amending our government code section for the sales and use tax records and who has access to them and so forth. And I had asked that be brought to us again so that we could look at putting the city treasurer on that. So I just wanted to make note of that we had talked about that. So, Mr. Mayor, I would look to see that come to us at some point in the near future.
It's listed as on the city treasurer's on the list at HG.
It is?
Yes.
Well, I didn't look at that.
Well,
Thank
there
you
you
very
go.
much. Okay, so we're covered. Thank you. I just wanted to report that I did attend the swearing-in ceremony for Carol Groom, County Supervisor, and Mark Church is the new president of the Board of Supervisors. So that has happened. And then Saturday I attended a ceremony recognizing the opening of a bikeway project in Brisbane, which is one of the projects we approved with DPAC. So it was nice to see that done. The nice thing about this project that was approved and it was now completed is it's making an effort to complete a north-south connection for people who commute by bicycle. And through Brisbane, there was a particularly unsafe condition that we were able to rectify. And that's it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Grocott. Mr. Ahmad.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. I would like to start on a happy note that the team of All Things Good and Virtuous, the University of Florida Gators, did vanquish the team of Evil and Villainy. I say this only because our dear friend and wonderful colleague, Mark Weiss, went to that unfortunate school and has been extremely gracious in letting me trash talk him for the last week and a half. Mr. Mayor, I did want to add one personal note. I got a lot of calls over the last couple of weeks from different reporters. One of the interesting points is that currently, according to a number of reporters, I'm the only Muslim who holds elected office in the state of California. And I get a lot of calls from folks who say, can you speak to some of the issues of violence? One act in particular hit me hard. It involved a couple of kids walking home. There was some words exchanged with another group. One kid was run down. He was beaten. He was stabbed repeatedly. And several painful hours later, he died. I'm not talking about Gaza. And I'm not talking about Darfur. This actually took place 2.7 miles from where we're sitting in Redwood City. There was a choice some people made to look at a group of people and call them them. It's easy to hate. and it's easy to make a decision to kill when you look at people as them. I'm not going to talk about things that are overseas because some very senseless acts are happening very, very close to home. And that's something that I want to address. I get to wake up every morning and I have the extreme privilege of serving my neighbors in San Carlos. That's my job, and that's what I want to do. And that's where publicly I will stand.
Okay, thank you for your comments, sir. Vice Mayor Royce.
Mr. Mayor, nothing to report this evening.
Okay, I also have nothing to report. So we'll move on to item 5, council appointments and presentations. 5A, consideration of appointing Alex Kumamoto to the Youth Advisory Council as a voting member for fiscal year 2008-2010.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, I'm Anthony Vassallo, Chairman of the Youth Advisory Council. Just recently, we unfortunately lost one of our 9 voting members who had to move and obviously can't serve on the Youth Advisory Council anymore. So we were down to 8, and what we always try to do is we try to get more of a middle school voice in the council because we have a bunch of high schoolers, but we need more middle schoolers to stay with us as they move up into high school and just to have that representation. So in the middle of the year, this isn't something we usually do, but to fill that void, we held a special interview for Alex, who has had an interest in the Youth Advisory Council. His application was fantastic, and the interview committee, consisting of myself, voting member Kevin Harris, and Jerry Fujimoto, very easily decided that we would appoint Alex to a 2-year term to fill that of Rob Wallace. So he was not able to make it tonight, but I just wanted to brief you guys a little bit on what was going on there and ask if you guys would appoint him and swear him in possibly at a later date.
Okay, Mr. Vassallo, and we'll talk about that, and hopefully we will. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Is there a motion on the floor?
So moved.
Do I hear a second? It's been moved and seconded to accept the resignation of Robert Wallace and appoint Alex Kumamoto to the Youth Advisory Council for the 2008-2010 term as a voting member. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, so Mr. Vassallo, you can have Mr. Kumamoto or however the city clerk, if we need to swear him in, whenever at a mutually acceptable time in one of the future meetings. Thank you very much. All right, moving on to item 6, presentation, 6A, presentation of proclamations in recognition of newly certified Barrier Green businesses in San Carlos.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. As you know, from time to time we come before the council to recognize businesses in San Carlos that have reached the status of certified green business in the Bay Area. This is a program that San Carlos has been active in now for over a year. We were one of the charter members, and the program basically challenges businesses throughout San Mateo County to perform various green practices, including more energy efficient lighting, more efficient use of water, recycling, and things of that sort. It's an extensive 11-page process. And when businesses go through that process and are certified by the various utilities as well as the City of San Carlos and County, they receive this certification and a listing in both a county-wide, city-wide, and region-wide directory. Tonight we're adding 2 more businesses in San Carlos to this list, and I'm proud to say that today, the county-wide, we're approaching 60 businesses that are certified, and as the county recently noted at a ceremony at the San Francisco Airport Museum, San Carlos continues to be by far more businesses than anybody else in the county. 1 out of every 3 certified green businesses is in effect in San Carlos. So with that, let me invite Mayor Grisilli to come down to the dais. We have awards for 2 businesses I'd like to introduce tonight and have the mayor present those awards. The first award is to the Kelly Moore Paint Company, and Keith Hussinger, who's the plant manager, is here to receive that award from the mayor. And also Gary Fazzino from Kelly Moore as well.
Gentlemen, we have not only one gift from the City of San Carlos, where there's a number of whereases, but we also have one from the County of San Mateo and from the Assembly Ira Ruskin another report. So we really appreciate it, especially with Kelly Moore. And I think, specifically your business, to be certified green, I think is an amazing thing. Because obviously, if you think of paint companies, you don't think of green. So I compliment you. That's my point. And I compliment both you gentlemen and your corporation and your company and all the workers there on being able to do this. So I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, and our other green business tonight, which brings our list to 19, is our first certified green business in the Harbor Industrial Area, and that is Martin Screen Shop. And representing Martin Screen Shop tonight is Mike Krushek.
Mr. Krushek, saying it right? Krusek. See, I followed what he said, and that got me in trouble right away. Mr. Krusek, again, congratulations. We've got something from the city, we've got something from the county, and we've also got something from Ira Ruskin of the state. And once again, on the industrial side, folks that are trying to make an effort in doing all that extra work for us.
You got to be green.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. Next item on the agenda is item 6B, which is introduction of new fire department battalion chief and new captains. Chief Fry.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Fire Department's been through some transitional changes in the last few months, and it's an exciting time as we develop some new personnel, and we're bringing some members into some leadership roles within the organization. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce a couple of the new fire captains. If they could come up here, Kent Thrasher, Jeff Thorne, and Gary Jacobs. Kent Thrasher was promoted October 1st of last year and took the place of Captain Rod English, who retired after 28 years of service within the organization. Kent began his career as a full-time firefighter in 1994 in Atlantic Beach Fire and Rescue Department in Florida. He worked there until 1996 when his wife received a job transfer to California and brought him out here. He then worked for Central Fire in Santa Cruz for about a year as a part-time paid call firefighter. And then in 1997, he went to work in the Daly City Fire Department. And in 1999, April of 1999, Kent was our first lateral firefighter that the fire department hired as a firefighter paramedic. So we're excited to have Kent here as a member of the organization and one of our new fire captains. Jeff Thorne began his full-time career in the fire service in 1995 as a firefighter paramedic in Bodega Bay Fire Department in Sonoma County. He worked there until 2000, and he was hired by the then South County Fire Authority here until 2003 when we were forced to lay off 7 firefighters. He then went to work for the Woodside Fire Protection District. In 2006, we had the opportunity after some reconstitution to bring some firefighters back, and we took advantage of that, and Jeff wholeheartedly came back to the organization after being gone for 3 years, and there did all of his rehiring. He came back to work for us, and he was promoted December 1st, 2008 to replace Battalion Chief Chet McConville, who retired as a move-up of a fire captain. So we're happy to have Jeff as a member of the organization as well. Gary Jacobs began his full-time fire service career in 1994 as a firefighter at the State of California Moffett Field Fire Department, Santa Clara County. In 1999, he was hired by South County Fire Authority as our second lateral firefighter that we had hired. He's been an instrumental person in this organization. I've seen no one as involved or as committed as Gary has been to this department over the years. In 2001, he was named Firefighter of the Year. Also in 2001, he was the American Legion Firefighter of the Year. 2002, the Lions Club Firefighter of the Year. Most recently, over the past 3 or 4 years, Gary Jacobs assisted the department in grant writing and assisted in obtaining over $750,000 in grant funding for equipment and apparatus for the department. Gary truly is an asset to the department and does some great things. We're happy to have him as a member of this organization as well. and Battalion Chief Dave Gillette, who was stuck in traffic. I'll just give you a quick little bio on him, and I'll bring him back at a future meeting, but he began his career in 1984 as a seasonal firefighter with the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection. He did that for 5 years through the 1989 fire season. In 1990, Dave was hired by South County Fire Authority and attended the San Mateo County Fire Academy. He was one of the first persons to attend through that academy as it was redone. In 1998, he was in August of 1998, he was appointed as an interim fire captain. In 1999, he was given a permanent nod as a fire captain. And Dave, as you will see through the years, is a hugely involved member, and his current responsibility is the hazardous materials response team. And he is in the process now of getting the hazardous materials response team that we have accredited and what they call typed by the state of California, so that we'll be within the system if they need a large disaster and they need a hazardous materials response. So I'll be bringing more information back to you on that. But Dave will truly be an asset to the department. He's replacing Chet McConville, who retired after 28 years of service. And Dave is stepping into some big shoes to fill, and I think he'll do a great job. So we'll,
Even though he's not here. Chief, thank you very much. As a member of the Fire Board, of course, I know these gentlemen and have met them all four of them. And needless to say, we have a terrific fire department, Belmont San Carlos Fire Department, and these folks have worked really hard to get promoted. They've had to take tests. They've had to accomplish various things in their career to get to these positions, and we're very fortunate as a community to have these dedicated individuals working for us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week as public servants. So thank you, Chief. Thank you, gentlemen, very much. Appreciate it. Okay. The next item we have on our agenda is item number 7, public comment. Persons wishing to address the City Council on matters not on the posted agenda. Each speaker is limited to 2 minutes. If there are more than 5, we may have to limit some of the time. But is there anyone wishing to speak on anything not on the posted agenda this evening? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on. Item 8 is the consent calendar. Consent calendar items are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request specific items to be removed for separate action. Anyone like anything to be removed tonight?
So having mentioned the consent calendar earlier, I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
Okay. Second. It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar. Ms. Boland?
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes?
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis is absent. Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Mayor Grisilli?
Yes. Okay, thank you. Move on to item 9, reports to council. Reports to council are updates on key city projects by city department heads and staff and city council subcommittees. They are informational in nature, and no action will be taken on these items at this meeting. Item 9A is feasibility of implementing a safe route to schools program. Mr. Wow.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'm here to report on the feasibility of implementing a Safe Routes to School program. A Safe Routes to School initiative is a nationwide initiative, and it's very active here in San Carlos at the community level. There are 5 elements to it, 5 E's: engineering, education, enforcement, encouragement, and evaluation. And 4 of the 5 elements are very much present here, the ones that have to do with community involvement and the police department. Education and encouragement is very active school committee, and enforcement is being done by the police department to the best of their ability. And the school committee has also done a lot with evaluating their program and collecting data on the program. So the missing piece is actually making some physical changes to the streets and sidewalks so that children can walk or bicycle to their schools more safely and conveniently. And some of the missing ingredients there have been, one of the missing ingredients has been funding to do that. The city has tried to obtain grant funding and has not been successful. Most recently, a $700,000 grant application was submitted, and we got 0. It was a very competitive process, and it looks to be continue to be competitive. But I have looked through the grant application and found some areas where we can make our application more competitive. One of the ways that I recommend that we do that is to do something called a school route plan, where working with the committee, we look at how we map out the preferred route to walk and bicycle to school, and then close the gaps, the most serious gaps along that route. And I've already started working with this committee from Arundel School. The Transportation and Circulation Commission has directed me to look at Arundel School first as the most in need of a Safe Routes to School program, and there's a very active group of parents there. Now, again, unless we get some grant funding, really this is going to have to compete with other capital projects when the capital program is considered, and you have one-time money that you can put into capital programs. One thing I should have mentioned in the staff report but failed to is that I have submitted this program, $700,000, to the economic stimulus package. So this is one eligible use of that economic stimulus funding, and it would fit into the idea of energy efficiency and reducing climate impacts as well. So with that, I'll conclude the staff report and see if there's any questions from the council.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Well tonight?
I have one.
Sure, Mr. Grocott.
Is the mapping project, will that be going for grant funding at all?
Well, I think we will be doing that with staff resources, so there's no real financial impact to that, staff and community resources. So I'm not waiting on grant funding to go forward with that.
Okay. I only ask because sitting on BPAC, we, with the county, we have gotten requests for planning type of projects. That said, they often don't get funding unless we've got a little gap where we might have, we pick our projects and we have a little money left over in that year, and then we might come back and look at some of those planning projects. So I'll grant you it's difficult to get, but it sometimes is worth the effort.
Okay. Any other questions? Mr. Royce?
Yeah, I'd just like to share a few thoughts on Safe Routes. I have been an active member with the Safe Routes group of parents, very progressive in joining the national program here, representing all of our elementary and the middle schools. And I just want to make sure, when I read the report, that we don't get too narrowly focused on sidewalks. To me, sidewalks can be important, but they're a major capital expense. It's dependent upon getting grants, which is maybe a one out of so many deal. If it doesn't happen, then we don't achieve our objective. Another alternative would be then to go to homeowners, create assessment districts in which we would ask people to fund and build the sidewalks in front of their streets, in front of their homes, which would be very expensive. And in today's economic times, I would not want to be asking our citizens and taxpayers in San Carlos to be paying for such capital expenses as improvements. I think the culture and the nature of our city, we have a lot of streets where there's no sidewalks. Sometimes it's not the safest. There's good judgment we need to use. Then there may be good places where sidewalks need to be placed where these schools are. But Safe Routes is very much more extensive than just the sidewalk part. And so a couple ideas I have is, and it may be through the 2+2 program, which for you at home and in the audience, that's our partnership with the school district. There's 2 people on council, 2 people on our school board that sit on this that meet regularly, is to also approach Safe Routes as a partnership with the schools. The schools may have a program like crossing guards, which would be, a lot of schools have that in other cities, a volunteer program where parents or students participate. The schools really manage it. Our police department could maybe provide some guidance and help with that. There's a lot of areas regarding signage. There's schools regarding some of the repainting, refreshing, or adding some of the striping that can be done around a lot of our schools, and improving the signage and so forth. That can be done. So, and then of course the most exciting part of it is from the city is joining the whole effort of the education and the promotion of Safe Routes. The school really was the leader in providing, if you remember back in the spring, it was a big push for getting all of the elementary and middle schools to walk to school. And we got a lot of news. It was on TV, it was on the radio. In fact, they called us San Carlos for the day. People in their cars, without cars, because all the children were walking to school. So with that, again, my major point is let's make sure we keep a vision of the entirety of safe routes. And my only other point, too, is before we spend money on sidewalks, which could be $500,000 to $2 million, there are issues regarding TL traffic issues, Orindel on San Carlos Avenue, there's Scoot, there's paving, there's just a lot of opportunities that if we're going to get grants and we're going to get money, sidewalks may be the place to do it, but I would hope that we would be able to talk to you and look at some options to council to make sure we get the best bang for the bucks and provide a healthy walking environment for our children to get to and from school with. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
If I may just segue onto what Mr. Royce just said. He's correct that sidewalks is not the only issue, and I would just like to add, again, sitting on the countywide BPAC committee, when we looked at safe routes to school with Menlo Park, their emphasis was not on walking to school, but on bicycling to school. And they developed a program in one of the neighborhoods that they call it a virtual school bus, where they have some parents that ride on the front of a pack and on the back, and in between are kids on bikes. And certainly that's something that I suppose we could also look at, and looking at our, working that in with our bicycle lanes wherever we have them, where we might add them, or where we do have them and might make them safer. I'm thinking of, for instance, San Carlos Avenue. I ride my son to school some days on a trailer bike, and when we go up San Carlos Avenue, it gets a little hairy in certain places where people have gotten used to just driving right over the bike lane because that seems to be the thing to do, and it can make it a little bit discouraging. So those are some things that could be looked at as well.
Thank you. Any comments?
Mr. Mayor, I serve on the board of the Peninsula Congestion Traffic Relief Alliance. It's a mouthful and a half. One point of frustration, and I'll throw this out to our good friend here to say this is something that may go to the Traffic and Circulation Commission. San Carlos does not have as many bus routes as some of our other colleagues in San Mateo County, number one. Number two, there's been some interesting federal changes that a bus route cannot look like a school bus route. This is federal legislation that passed with some significant pressure from private coach companies. It is something that we ought to look at. How do we address it? How do we get it corrected? And how do we start to get Samtrans to provide better services for our kids to be able to get to school, because we do want to reduce traffic. Getting them onto something that is certified with a safe driver, et cetera, is a good way to go. So I'll put that out as something I would like to see addressed in context of this. How can we get better bus routes and some more public transportation available?
Okay, thank you. All right. Robert, I think you've got enough information, as they say, and lots of openings. Thanks a lot for your report. I noticed that our new battalion chief has arrived. So, Deborah, I'm sorry. Would you please sit down? Thank you. And Chief, would you please come up? We're going to go back to item 7. Sorry. Sorry, Deborah. You couldn't read my mind. I did.
You can stand
right there.
You can stand right there.
Make sure you're in the picture.
Yeah. This is our newly promoted Battalion Chief Dave Gillette, who was promoted December 1st of last year. Took the place, as I stated, as the Chet McConville, who retired after 28 years of service. And Dave has stepped into some big shoes, and I think he's going to fill them in quite well and do some great stuff within the organization. And it's an honor to have Dave as part of the management team, as part of the staff in the organization. And members of the fire board, you'll be seeing him on a regular basis in meetings, and especially at the Emergency Services Council, as he is our representative for hazmat and the county and some other programs that we have in place. So I talked a little bit about Dave and his experience, and we're just happy to have him as part of the team. So welcome, Dave. Congratulations.
I just wanted to thank you for making the effort to come all the way down, and since you did, I wanted to make sure you were recognized personally. Actually, you got 2 claps, because the first time we clapped for you, you an abstention. So anyway, thanks a lot, Dave. Again, if I could reiterate, and I apologize for beating it, all promotions, these 4 gentlemen are all in our organization promoted from within. And I think that's a terrific situation to have happen in any organization, especially in public safety. Now, Ms. Nelson, sorry, thank you. Well, she said, announce 10A, I guess. I should do that, huh?
Okay.
Item 10, unfinished business. Item A, review and discuss initial study for the Highlands Park Lower Athletic Field Turf Replacement Project and provide staff direction. Thank you. Ms. Nelson.
I'm Deborah Nelson, the planning manager. The project before you tonight concerns Highlands Field, but it's really the environmental assessment that we're looking at and the choice about which environmental assessment you direct us to pursue. The project does involve, the assessment does involve the conversion of natural turf to synthetic turf at Highlands Park. This is the general vicinity map of where it is in San Carlos, kind of up in the hills and almost central. This is the park. The lower portion of the park is that which will be replaced. And this is an example of the kind of activity that occurs on the park, and most of the emphasis will be on soccer field and other field kinds of uses. What we have had prepared, you directed us in August, well, April, you looked at the project itself, and then in August directed us to go out and have an initial study prepared. An initial study is part of the continuum of documents that are considered in the California Environmental Quality Act. There are exemptions, and an example of that is if you were going to replace a picnic table with a picnic table, that would be clearly exempt. There are negative declarations when there is no impact, and the document would so state. There are mitigated negative declarations when there may be impacts or there are impacts addressed, but for which there is mitigation that you can impose either as the project is being constructed or as the project is in place and implemented. Or there are environmental impact reports. And I might just say that a level of controversy is not a trigger for an environmental impact report. It is generally impacts for which mitigation cannot occur. So we are tonight at the point of the initial study, and what we'd like for you to do is receive information on this draft initial study and comments from the public, and then provide us any comments or questions, and if you desire additional analysis than what is in the draft initial study, you so specifically state to us what it is you would like us to consider. And our recommendation is that you direct the preparation of a draft negative declaration. There are no impacts addressed that cannot be mitigated. And our environmental consultants will further discuss that with you. I'd like to introduce Janet Palma of Pacific Municipal Consultants on the front, on the edge, and Amy Goldberg-Day of LFR Environmental Management and Consulting Engineers. And they'll do a thorough presentation of the content of the initial study and their findings from their research. Park and Rec staff, of course, is also here to answer questions as well.
Okay, thank you.
You want to do that? Yeah. Okay.
Have an extra pen.
There we go.
You got next one?
Good evening, council members. My name is Janet Palma. I am the PMC project manager for the Highlands Park Turf Conversion Project Environmental Review. Our firm was retained by the city of San Carlos in August of last year to address the potential environmental issues associated with the installation of synthetic turf at the lower athletic fields for Highland Park. Let me see if I can do this. There we go. Okay, and you've kind of basically already seen that this is the general vicinity of the park, and the lower field here is the project site in question. Nothing will be done to the upper field or the tennis courts. And so the field is located within Highlands Park near Belendi Drive and Aberdeen Drive. And the specific things to be addressed besides the turfing conversion is completion of the fencing around the field, vehicle access gate, pedestrian access gate, bollards to prevent access down in this corner here, and a stormwater treatment device if necessary. So I'm going to go over just a little bit of CEQA 101 in regards to what Deborah has already said, that we were directed to prepare an initial study. And the purpose of initial study is to provide the lead agency, the City of San Carlos, with information to use as the basis for deciding whether to prepare an EIR or a negative declaration. It also allows the agency to modify a project mitigating adverse impacts before an EIR is prepared, thereby enabling the project to qualify for a negative declaration. And it can assist the preparation of an EIR, facilitate environmental assessment early to design the project better, provide documentation of the factual basis for the finding in the negative declaration that the project won't have a significant effect on the environment, and eliminate unnecessary EIRs. So in summary, CEQA documents such as this are intended to be disclosure documents to inform decision makers on the action that you are to take based on the information provided. So I have some more graphics of a close-up of what artificial turf actually looks like. It can be painted and striped and looks very much like grass these days with their color. And this is the crumb rubber that is used as fill. And basically it's done in layers here as a soccer ball to show you this is one of the things that, one of the sports that the city is wanting to do more access and to provide this, to provide access to things like soccer on a more regular basis. So you have a concrete base and a stone covering on that, a backing, the sand and crumb rubber, and the grass on top of that. So the technical studies that we prepared were a biological resources study, an air quality analysis, and we have here from LFR, Amy Goldberg-Day, who did the human health hazards review, which included several constituents of concern and bacteriological issues. And we did a drainage analysis, a noise analysis, and a traffic study. Particular issues that have been raised in studies for artificial turf or synthetic turf, the terms can be used interchangeably, are lead that used to be included in the pigment that is used on the grass, heavy metal substances from the crumb rubber, irritation from rubber pellets, increase in injuries due to the hardness of the surface, such as ACL, footlock, concussion, and turf toe, heat exposure and turf burn, and staph infections. So these are things that have been raised.
You didn't want to say
and
that
we will
word?
address.
You didn't want to say that word, Staphylococcus aureus?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding you. Just kidding.
I'm not the...
Sorry. Sorry. Couldn't
I'm
resist.
just going to go through this, and I'm going to let Amy do the...
Okay. I'm sorry. I couldn't resist. I apologize.
So what we have been informed is that what the city of San Carlos would do is they would provide specifications to the manufacturer of the product that would have no lead in the pigment, that the product would have a combination of sand and rubber for the field, so it doesn't play as hot as rubber, and that they would use cryogenic rubber versus ambient rubber. And cryogenic rubber, I'll just say, is supposedly smoother and rounder than other rubbers, and is less likely to scratch skin or eyes. And it's also supposedly more pure and neutral in case it is accidentally ingested, and is less likely to contain one of the 4 main compounds that Ms. Goldberg-Day is going to talk about. And most of the chemicals emitted from the rubber granules are quite common in urban and suburban air environments. So with that, I'll just go over one more item before I'll turn it over, and that's that air quality impacts were analyzed, and no significant impacts based on Bay Area Air Quality Management District standards and criteria for greenhouse gases or CO2 were found. And VOC gases from crumb rubber won't pose a health concern for athletes, officials, or spectators. For construction impacts, the use of best management practices during construction would minimize those impacts. So with that, I'm going to turn it over.
Thank you, Janet. Said, I'm Amy Goldberg-Day. I am an environmental toxicologist employed by the company LFR. And prior to that, if it's of interest, I was a hazardous materials specialist for San Mateo County, and San Carlos is my jurisdiction. So I've been to almost every hazardous waste generator facility and underground tank facility in this town. So quite familiar with what goes on here. When Janet hired me as a sub, they wanted to have someone who is a professional toxicologist review the toxicology. It's quite controversial. So when I submitted my report to Janet, I summarized 16 published reports. I actually reviewed, felt like hundreds, but I felt 16 were, the results were defensible. And I come from a strict scientific background, and it's very important to me that the results were substantiated and something that I felt were citable. And so the reports I looked at, they're from various agencies within the United States and states within the United States, from France, Norway, Sweden. I'm a little biased towards the university studies. I feel that my bias means they don't have a bias. They're not doing it to promote any cause. They're looking to answer a question. And so Penn State, New Jersey School of Medicine, North Carolina State University, and University of Utah seem to have the most studies, and many community and consumer protection groups. Is that? Oh, next. Oh, we have to go through learning curve. Where is it? Next slide. No, over to the left. This.
Nope, not
Oh, yeah,
There.
that one.
Nope.
But it's not working.
Here, let me do it. I got it.
Sorry about that. It's not working. If it's, no, it's,
There we go.
there it goes.
Nope, that's
That's yours.
backwards.
You went
I'm
backwards.
sorry.
There is the arrow. It's not working. The arrow, this next one over. I was? Yeah. Well, I'll just hit next up at the top. There you go. Hopefully. Oh, no, I just had that one. Okay, so the conclusions of the reports, and I generalize the conclusions, that the reports using a quantitative risk assessment approach, and that's how all our environmental regulations are complied with, is a quantitative risk assessment approach, saying that there's thresholds in which if you're below this threshold, then your product is safe, the environment is safe. Those studies said essentially that the newer turf fields are safe, and particularly California EPA published a very comprehensive report. And then Bainbridge School District also sponsored. They have heavy rains. Bainbridge Island's just off Seattle. Heavy rains up there, but high demand. So they wanted to know about the turf and the all-weather turf, and funded a comprehensive studies. Reports using more of a qualitative approach. There are chemicals there, so we think that there's data gaps, are the ones who said we shouldn't use turf. just in the presence of lambda chemicals is enough. And interesting enough, that's how Sweden, I learned this a little bit, how they run their countries. If there's chemicals, we're going to question it. They don't take the approach that the US EPA and most other countries do, that there actually are safe levels. So that's why there's a moratorium in Sweden. See if it works for me this time. Next. So what I've come to the conclusion is reading it, it really is a balancing act in how you approach a turf field. You have an incredible increased use of fields, which means increased physical activities. You can play in all weather. There's water conservation. They don't require as much water. You decrease your exposures to your pesticides and fertilizers, and there's a decreased maintenance cost. On the other side, there's a strong public perception and concern about it. They go, if there's potential exposure for low levels of compounds in the used tires used in the crumb rubber, there's concern about that. And they do have increased temperature on hot days. Somewhere in there. So I put a table together, just kind of summarizing the old nylon turf. This got a lot of publicity. This is what New Jersey had on those turf fields that were closed versus the newer turfs versus soil and grass. People forget that there's chemicals in soil and grass. And one thing I tell people is there's gold in them hills. Where there's gold, there's arsenic. And the Sierra soils came down and made the soils in San Mateo County. So San Mateo County actually has elevated arsenic naturally occurring when compared to other parts of the country. So in looking at the various chemicals, lead, some of the New Jersey fields did have very high concentrations of lead. The new turfs do not have lead, and talking to the manufacturers, they're saying their livelihood is dependent now on not having lead. Since lead has gotten so much publicity, people will not buy products with lead in them. And like I said, there's pesticides and fertilizers. The last four chemicals are things that have been detected when you take the crumb rubber, you put it in a vial, you add acid, and shake it up. There is some volatilization of these various chemicals. And as you can see, they're in extremely low concentration under an experimental condition. But I also want to say, too, that a turf or no turf, there's no hiding from the chemicals. And I got this, your benzene in Redwood City Air. This is from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. That is the closest monitoring station to San Carlos. And that's 0.5 parts per billion. Where the California EPA says the benzene in indoor air should not be below 0.026 parts per billion. So it's, and then it's balancing out. And then the arsenic, once again, in soils is 3 to 14 parts per million. And once the California EPA says the safe level is 0.07 parts per million. I just want to emphasize, too, that when you're hiking, you raise dust, you will be breathing in some of this arsenic. And we have adjusted to living with chemicals, so the turf is not going to change that. So also what our company did, we did a drainage evaluation just to make sure that during a maximum storm event that there would not be flooding issues. So the LFAR professional engineers performed their review. They evaluated current draining plans provided by City of San Carlos. They used the rational method, which you can Google to look up, is the most common method to calculate peak stormwater flow rates. And the current capacity of the field with the turf, the current capacity is 6.5 cubic feet per second of water, and the estimated peak in a maximum storm event with turf is 6.1 cubic feet per second. So your current drainage system should be sufficient, and modifications to the drainage would not be needed for the turf field. And with that, now this is it. There we go. Maybe it'll work for you.
Okay, so I was just going to go over the rest of the important topic areas, and the next one was noise, because what is anticipated to happen is that weekday practice periods will see the greatest increase in usage from 3 to 10 p.m. on weekdays. There's going to be an additional 4 practice groups on weekdays, and that the proposed project would result in an average daily increase of 34.9 over existing conditions, but 5.5 over pre-existing conditions, which back in 2002, before they instituted the limited usage, there used to be a higher usage at this field. And then because of the maintenance issues, that it went down to what it is now. So overall, it's going to be only 5.5% more than 2002. And then the nearest residences are about 60 to 75 feet away. Okay, and there's some of the nearest residences across the street. And then for traffic and parking, the traffic analysis was based on fall and spring peak hour PM trips, because that would be when there would be the most playing happening. And again, the practice is the practice is what's going to increase. So they determined that both trip generation and parking would be less than significant impacts. Highlands Park right now has 96 parking spaces, up to 6 times more capacity than you really need. So that's considering that there won't be any parking in front of anybody's houses. That's just parking in the parking lots and in areas away from people's houses. These were the traffic study intersections that were considered, and 2 of them are stop controlled and 2 of them are signaled. And 2 of the intersections would go from an LOSC to an LOSD, but at mid-level D, it's still not a significant impact according to the city criteria. There would be, what it means is that for the Alameda-Melendi intersection, which is non-signalized, there would be an additional 12.3 seconds delay. And for the Alameda-San Carlos signalized intersection, the difference is not noted as a seconds delay, it's noted as a volume to capacity increase, and so it would go from 79% to 80% capacity, which is really only a 1% increase. For parking specifically, the increase would be to capacity may be on special event days, which I don't know how often those are, but we didn't really analyze special events, and that would be probably the only time you might see a capacity crowd for parking. For existing fall conditions, the peak hours experienced an overlap during the soccer practice, which is why it shows in the table to 6 p.m. existing conditions instead of 3 to 5 p.m. That's table 15.8 in the initial study document. So here's the main parking lot in front of the field. You can see that there are still some spaces available, and people are here practicing with their equipment. And here's the field as it is today, and here along this street is where a lot of the parking is in front of the field. So to summarize what our findings are in the initial study, all of the impacts that we identified in the major topic areas and the other topic areas were not found to be of really concern at all, such as agriculture. And they've been determined to be the less than significant or mitigable to a less than significant level. And so our recommendation is that a mitigated negative declaration can be prepared for this project. And just in closing, I just want to say that to be, as disclosure as possible, which is what we did, in addition to all the documents that LFR reviewed, my staff also reviewed a lot of studies, articles. There's been an incredible amount of material generated on this topic. There's been recent cases in Santa Cruz. The Santa Cruz City Schools had their negative declaration challenged, and as well in San Anselmo, that LFR also was part of, that they spoke of at, regarding that issue. And there's been no case where an EIR was determined to be needed to be prepared. All impacts could be mitigated. So the two studies that we did not review because they have not been completed yet and so are still pending are one by the US EPA on lead content, which now would seem to be a moot point because manufacturers such as Field Turf are not using lead in their paint pigment anymore. And the one that was directed by Senate Bill 1277 to the Integrated Waste Management Board and OEHA, which is to be concluded by 2010. And that's a more broader, comprehensive study that's, both of these studies now are anticipated to have similar conclusions to the previous studies as the manufacturing has progressed into modern times. The manufacturers are taking into consideration all the concerns that have been brought up and have been trying to address them as much as possible. So that pretty much concludes my presentation. And
Thank you, ladies, very much. Appreciate the information. Gentlemen, questions for these folks?
we did have handouts of the complete list of things that were reviewed.
Okay, we'll take any and all paper. Mr. Grocott, did you have some questions?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
The first one kind of deals perhaps with our city staff, but I think you guys can answer this as well. I did get a couple of emails today about the documents. I guess people were talking about, this booklet that you put out. We got it out on Thursday, and there was concern by the public that this is a lot of material to read from Thursday to today. So my question is, if we were to do a mitigated negative declaration, would material like this be a part of that? In other words, you see where I'm going, is would the public then have an opportunity to review material like this?
Exactly. This is not a published document yet. In fact, this is not generally how things go, but this is how we were directed to do this, so that you would have the opportunity to make the decision in which direction to go based on all the information that you have. So at this point, this is just an initial study still. Nothing, we're recommending, that a mitigated negative declaration can be prepared as the consulting firm, because we have not found any impacts that can't be mitigated to less than significant. So what the next step would be that we would publish this document.
As part of, if we did
and then
MDN,
people would have the chance to comment on it.
Then this would be part of the documents that would go out as part of the MDN if we chose to go that route versus an EIR?
Yes.
And if we did an EIR, something like this definitely would go out.
Yeah.
Right?
This would be the document that would be published.
Okay.
Unless there were, comments and we needed to make some adjustments.
Make some adjustments.
Yeah,
okay, so we could look at this kind of like as a draft.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Question about another question I got via email today was some folks were aware of a New York, I think the state of New York study on heat and the greater amount of heat that gets reflected off these fields. Is that what you were saying when you talked about our specification for rubber and sand? Because this document seems to say about a 10 degrees additional amount of heat.
There's no way to not have an increase in heat. When you have rubber versus real soil, there's going to be an increase in the temperature of the surface compared to natural grass. The question is, how great an increase is it going to be?
Yes.
And how great an effect is it going to have on the people that are playing on the field?
Exactly.
So what the manufacturers have done now is they've made a combination of sand and rubber and used this cryogenic rubber, which doesn't heat up quite as much. In addition, the ambient temperature of San Carlos isn't as great as areas such as the more the study that's actually cited the most is the study that was done in Brigham Young University in Utah, where the temperatures probably get over 100 degrees in the summertime. So when you have temperatures like that, then the increase is much greater. And I don't know if you want to say any more about that, but that's basically the
Have you, before you comment, have you ladies seen the Health Department, State of New York, and
It's
what
on
they
the
look at?
references, and it was reviewed.
I'm sure we have,
as
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was one of the studies I did review. And one thing that report...
Could you move just a little bit more?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Yes, it is included in the reference list. It's one of the studies I reviewed. And one of the conclusions was the hotter it was, the greater impact that the fields had.
Could I ask a quick sort of interjection?
Yeah,
Mr. Kurkoff?
Sure, segue.
New York has a whole different kind of, because I've been to New York in the summertime. I mean, their atmosphere is different than ours. Does that make any difference?
It does. And I did look...
Is there any kind of quantitative, if you're in New York and it's 85 degrees in the middle of summer when it's really muggy, or if you're here and it's 85 degrees, is there any difference?
There is a difference, but at this point, I don't have data to say it's quantitative.
Okay. I'm just curious. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ms.
But
Kurkoff. I'm sorry.
there are people now who are very concerned about it, and they're going around and hopefully follow through and get it published, taking field temperatures and ambient temperatures in the Bay Area so they can answer that very questions encountered in New York. So that's information and study. Oh, okay, there is a table.
There is a table in the appendix on a field turf heat study results. That's actually table B1 to your report. It's appendix B2. So there were studies in the Bay Area, and you can see the summary of the differences between when it's sunny all the time and really hot, and when it's like more like the ambient temperature. The average temperature in the summer in San Carlos is about 81 degrees. So if you add 10 degrees to that, it's about 91 degrees.
I get it. Go ahead.
Couple more. Sure. Two questions regarding traffic and parking. It seems to say, if I'm reading this correctly, and I had a little trouble negotiating my way through some of this.
I don't blame you, so do I. Traffic and parking are not my forte.
On page 125, at the bottom, under B, it says no impact, and it says, while the proposed project would increase the number of vehicle trips to and from the Highland Park's lower athletic field, these trips will utilize any intersections identified as congestion management program intersections in the 2007 CMP. I think there's a little word left out of that sentence. Will not. Is that what it means to say?
Yeah, it probably should say will not utilize, because as relates to CMP intersections, there's no cumulative impact when you take into account all the projects in the area. And so there's a threshold that you have to cross as far as CMP goes. I think it's 100 trips or something like that. And
so it seems
the project doesn't.
It seems like a legal nuance in a way to me as a layperson, that we're saying, well, it's not a CMP intersection, so therefore no impact, and you can't mitigate it. Am I correct on that?
Well,
I'm not trying to, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to attack. I'm saying that as council members, we can look at this two ways. One, we can just get a gut feeling and say, well, we don't want that kind of traffic at our intersections necessarily, whether or not they show up as CMP intersections. But you have to approach it in the legal sense, and you have to acknowledge this is not a CMP intersection, therefore there's no impact.
Right, and if you just look on page 116, there are specific questions that the traffic section answers. So B, where it says no impact, goes under that particular question, which asks whether the project will exceed individually or cumulatively the level of service standard, that's LOS, standard, established by the County Congestion Management Agency. So that's why the question is answering that particular issue in B.
Okay. And then also on page 125, there's a comment on Aberdeen Drive about entering the parking lot, the traffic on Aberdeen Drive, and that, well, most of it's going to go into the parking lot, so therefore it's not going to have an impact. And again, I guess that's the kind of thing where that can be the analysis. But if we feel like as a council, or if we get a lot of comment from the public that, well, that's really not the case, here's, I think people are ready tonight to show us pictures of what this place looks like sometimes. This is the analysis, but we can choose to accept that, and we can say, okay, that's analysis enough. So, really the question tonight is, do we do an EIR or do we do a negative DAC? And we can say, well, that's analysis enough. We're ready to go with a negative DAC. But we're not necessarily saying, yeah, we agree with this. There's never any problems there. We're okay. We're going to go move ahead with the project. We're really just saying, yeah, we can accept this report and go with a negative DAC. Later on, as a council, we might hear the community's comments about traffic in the area and say, maybe this isn't such a good site to do a project because the community concern. You follow what I'm...
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right. Well, I just wanted to make sure about that. And then the last question I had doesn't seem to be addressed anywhere in here, and it rather surprised me, and that is the offset. You might, there's a lot of talk these days about carbon footprint and so forth, and even when we do our general plan, we have to make a statement about carbon footprint and all this planning for it and so forth. So I was a little shocked not to see anything in here about, okay, we're going to take so much square foot of natural grass that's doing the interchange of oxygen to carbon dioxide, and we're going to replace it with plastic, which has none of that interaction. And there's nothing in here that says, okay, you've done that, you got to mitigate it. You have to go plant some trees someplace or something.
Well, again, it's a matter of a threshold being crossed,
Okay.
and, the site is approximately 3 acres. So
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of things, it's about the size of an infill project. And if you converted an open space of infill into a housing project, it would basically be the same concept.
Okay, so it's not something that we have to do per this environmental document, or even if we...
We did do an analysis.
Sure.
And
But we didn't
really
meet the threshold.
No.
Okay, so it'd be up to us as a council or community to say, well, we've done this, we really should,
Yeah, I mean,
offset
in the
that.
end, it's a matter of whether you want to you weigh the benefits and
Sure.
the negatives regarding this issue. My understanding is that you have a great demand for new field use or additional field use in the city, and this is one of the ways to address that. Because otherwise you have to deal with having to close the field regularly to maintain it. So there's pros and cons, as Amy pointed out, to both sides of things.
Okay. Great, thank you. Mr. Mayor, if I can just comment to you and my colleagues, part of the reason I think you could see the line of my questioning on the document and what we're looking at tonight is because of a lot of emails I got today, which seem to indicate people are thinking we're approving the project, and we're not. We're looking at
All of us
process.
received those, yeah.
Yeah, we're looking
Not
at
there yet,
process,
yeah.
and do we do a negative DEC, or do we do an EIR, and that's what we're looking at. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ahmad, do you have any questions of these ladies?
No, reserve comments.
Okay, Mr. Royce?
Yeah. So when you talked about parking, is there a way or to measure human behavior on what people do versus the facts? And my example would be, the parking lot could be half empty, and people drive in and the soccer game's already started, and you see your kid playing and you can park on the right side in front of someone's house. Now granted, that's not their parking space, it's public right away, but people sometimes behave differently than what the statistical data of how much parking is available. Does that enter into this at all?
I mean, there are things that can be done, and I understand that there are already things in place when permits are issued that say, try to have all your people not park in front of people's houses. I mean, you can ask people not to do that, and you can always ask people not to do that and make that a part of your permitting process or whatever kind of notification process you have for people who use the facility. And like you say, people will still maybe do whatever they feel like doing. You can't.
Okay, so there's a lot of flexibility on that one. And then my other one, and I didn't see it, and I'm sorry because this is, you've accomplished the goals as thick as turf is, actually, in reality, I think. But I looked under recycling, and it had a lot of stuff about, normal cans, bottles, and so forth. But when the replacement of the turf comes due, is there any significant concerns or anything when you pull all the stuff up and dispose of it?
Well, my
That is in
understanding
your
is that if there's any, concerns, that like if a regular landfill won't take it, then you'll have to take it to the appropriate landfill that will take, materials like this.
Okay, but is that covered in here? Or did I-
We did, there should be a note like that.
There was? Okay.
I was just going to say, Vice Mayor Royce, through the chair, that it also varies by manufacturer. For example, one of the manufacturers that we've received literature on, the so-called Prolon line, claims that their material is 100% recyclable. So it's going to vary based on how what the turf is made out of.
The state of the art changes daily, literally. And, we were trying to keep up with it up until we printed this document,
Okay,
basically.
great. Well, thank you very much. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Okay. Well, no more questions. We have a number of people that would like to speak. I'll be calling out some names. We'd like to keep this to around 2 minutes for each person's comment so that everyone would have a chance to speak. I have a number of speaker cards. If you'd like to fill out a card, please do so and pass it up to the city clerk so we can get you on in the queue here. I'll be calling a couple of names so that perhaps the second person can be standing up, ready to go. The first name I have is Maria Fardas, followed by Danielle Huerta.
Good evening. I'm here to please request a full environmental impact review on the matter of turf and the impact on the lower field in the Highlands Park. I'm always amused to hear that there's no impact on traffic, nor carbon dioxide, nor parking in the area. I think that it is worth hearing from the members of the community who live across the field, such as in Aberdeen. And I know that there's pictures here, and I'm sorry that I don't have any pictures because this document was provided in such last notice, and I didn't have all of my documents together. But I would like to just let you know that the cars block our driveway on a daily basis. We have considered having, tow trucks come and move them away. We have no access to the street, and this could become a major hazard in case of emergency. And the lights are on until all hours of the night, even though they're supposed to go off at 10, but they don't. And I would really like to ask you, if you have children, to try and put a 4-year-old to sleep at game nights, and which is very frequent, and after 10 o'clock when the light is piercing through your window, or try and close your window in summer nights trying to have some peace and quiet in the area. I would also like to make a few additional comments. In such times of economic stress, we think that the city of San Carlos should think about using their money and your time and our time perhaps more wisely to matters maybe that is more beneficial to the residents and to yourselves as well. The matter of turf has been on the agenda for a number of years now, and it seems to just be coming back over and over again. We would like to just ask you to please consider your time and our budget very carefully in terms to support what needs to be done and what is the best thing for our city. I would like to also remind you that in a changing environment, when we are moving into green businesses, this is counterintuitive and completely going in the opposite direction of removing the green space that we have and turning it into plastic. This will not only have a significant impact on the area, but also all the influential residents of San Carlos would not want to live in an area of that sort. And believe you me, that they will move out. And that is not the trend we want to set for San Carlos. Again, I emphasize, please use your time and our money in this economic time wisely. And this is not our solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Danielle Huerta, followed by Richard Crone.
Hello, I live at 205 Glasgow Lane. I wanted to reiterate Councilman Grockett's comment that the length of time given the public to review this document prior to this meeting was insufficient. What I did want to say regarding the document itself or the study was that I was distressed to hear this evening that regarding toxic substances in the turf, the approach taken was to say that, well, since we already have background levels of toxic substances, adding some more won't be that bad. And I realized that for certain things they were seemingly relatively low levels. But there are certainly chemicals which the EPA has now declared that there's no safe levels of them. And I don't know those particular chemicals well enough to comment on what's a safe level in today's standards. But I do know that the history of environmentally caused health problems over the last 60 years in this country has been to say we can manufacture products with certain level of lead, certain level of this, certain level of that, and then only after populations get sick does the EPA be able to say, oh, actually, that wasn't a safe level. And I'm very nervous about exposing our children to additional chemicals that aren't already in our environment. I also like to express some doubt about how thoroughly the company doing this study observed what actually happens during soccer practices at Highlands Park, because I can guarantee you that the bulk of the 96 spaces that are quoted are by the tennis courts, and that very few people park there during practices, and that all the parking is done in the small lot and on Aberdeen Drive. So I want to reiterate what some council members mentioned about the parking existing and actual behavior. And the neighborhood has looked into whether it's possible to have Aberdeen made into some kind of neighborhood parking only, and that's not possible under city law today. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you for your comments. Richard Crone, followed by Heidi Liebenguth-Crone.
You're holding it for them. Council members, the consultant's report seemed to indicate that there was little or no risk, or risk could be mitigated. There is a substantial risk here. It's a financial risk. What wasn't included in this report was the objective, unbiased, transparent financial review of the business case for replacing natural grass with synthetic turf. In prior meetings, we reviewed with you, assuming a 10-year life on synthetic turf, that natural grass maintenance would always be less. In fact, the analysis we provided with you with complete transparency and objectivity showed that you could replace the field 3 times a year with brand new sod and still be cheaper than synthetic turf. Now, since we've last met, just a few miles away in Redwood City, we've learned that they now have to replace Hoover Park synthetic turf with just a little less than 6 years' use. Take the numbers that I share with you today and simply cut it in half, because the useful life at 6 years says that you could replace this field with completely natural sod, rolling out brand new sod a little more than every 2 years, and it would still be less cost than synthetic turf, without any of the risks that you might be mitigating or compromising when you consider synthetic turf. We started out this meeting acknowledging and recognizing certified green businesses. Would Highlands Park be a certified green business after you put in synthetic turf? This is a zero-sum game here. If you take and put synthetic turf, you take away a multi-use park with natural grass. It's a way. Whereas with natural grass, it's not a zero-sum game.
Mr. Crone,
you provide, I will wrap up.
Thank you.
You provide use to all stakeholders in all constituencies in the most fiscally sound way for the city. Please consider your fiscal responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Crone, and followed by Ann Tang. Go ahead.
Okay. My name's Heidi Liebenguth-Crone, and I live on Glasgow Lane. And I, too, wish to point out that only 6 years after its installation, Hoover Park synthetic field is deteriorated to the point where replacement is necessary. Redwood City is replacing this field for $905,447. This is the discounted price, said to be 40% off the expected price of $1,509,078. How can San Carlos embark on this kind of a money pit when our city and our nation is in a financial crisis? There has been no planning and no budgeting for replacement costs that are projected to run at least $1,500,000 probably every 6 years. Any savings on water are indeed just a drop in the bucket compared to the synthetic field replacement costs. For that kind of money, we could not only reseed but roll out fresh grass on the field every other year, as Mr. Crone just spoke to you. And what about the more highly ranked parks and recreation needs in San Carlos? It's wrong to squander millions of hard-earned taxpayer dollars on one synthetic field. This is not a public service. It is a public hijacking. Real grass does not contain carcinogenic chemicals, as does the crumb rubber infill. Real grass does not contain lead, as does the plastic fiber carpet. Real grass does not need to be disposed of in a toxic waste dump. It does not create a heat island contributing to global warming. It does not poison rainwater runoff. It creates oxygen and food for wildlife. It connects us with the natural world. Our children do far more at Highlands Park than play soccer. They play tag. They run through the sprinklers. They make daisy chains. The parks are for the children and all citizens of San Carlos for a multitude of uses.
Could you wrap it up, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Don't destroy this precious natural resource for the desires of a few competitive athletes. This is the wrong project at the wrong time. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Ann Tang, followed by Richard Wachter. Or Wachter? I say it wrong, sorry.
Hi, I'm here to express my concern about this project. I hate to reiterate what Danielle said, but I've taken the same notes. I have real concerns about the existence of chemicals in our environment serving as justification for adding more chemicals. And if you look at the San Carlos current master plan, this is just step one in putting plastic turf on every single field practically in this entire city. So we're talking about, this is step one to pouring lots more chemicals and adding more benzene and more lead and all the other multisyllabic chemicals that were on those lists that we don't know what the impact of those are. If tires are too toxic to be disposed of in a regular landfill, why do we want to grind them up and put them on our fields? That just doesn't make sense to me. I can't believe that runoff from tires off of the fields would be less toxic from a field than it would be from a landfill. So I think that there's a real concern that going down this path, we're not, that the concerns about chemicals and heat and all the things that have been mitigated, we haven't looked at it enough. I mean, no one thought asbestos was going to kill the number of people that it did when they were putting it in every single building in the United States for insulation. And the costs involved in taking that out could be exactly where we're going to end up 5 years from now when we discover that this field is toxic and we need to pull it out. And then we have not only paid for the field, we have to pay to take it out and we have to pay to replace it. I think right now there are numerous studies going on in the state of California and elsewhere. Why would we be moving ahead with a project like this and with our own study when we have other studies in the state that we should be waiting for the results for at a minimum? And in addition, even given what we know today, I think moving forward with this project would be a huge mistake. And I think that we need to evaluate the environmental impacts of this decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tang. Richard Wachter, followed by Greg Harris.
Good evening, council members. I just want to apologize. I didn't have time to prepare for this tonight. I just found out very late notice, which I really don't understand why, given its significant impact on our community. I want to start off with saying I have a 3-year-old. I live at 117 Glasgow Lane, and we often go to the park. It amazes me that the studies that have been brought up tonight suggest that the impact for traffic is really not that serious. The problem, I think, is a lot of parents running late for soccer games do drive a little quickly, quicker than what is truly safe. I personally have contacted the San Carlos Police Department about cars that have parked in areas that are simply not for parking, especially on the corners where it blocks vision, so that I have to hold my 3-year-old's hand, and literally that's not even good enough. I have to pick her up and sort of dash across the street. And I think that Matt put it really quite well. What's your gut feeling here as to how you would really feel if this happened in your backyard? A lot of the people that are pro-soccer, and I say pro-soccer because quite frankly I don't think any of us would be here if it wasn't for soccer. That's really the issue, is where are we going to play soccer? I think that what Matt said was, what's your gut feeling here if you lived on Aberdeen or Glasgow or Mellenby or anywhere in that vicinity? How would you feel about a natural surface that large being taken out and replaced with plastic? How would you feel if it was in your backyard? A lot of our soccer people would suggest that, well, we're only concerned because it's in our backyard. Well, they're right. It's our backyard. If I didn't live here, I probably wouldn't be as concerned. And I just want you to just try to take a moment to perhaps reflect upon what Matt suggested, and what is your gut feeling in addition to looking at just this huge report. What's your gut feeling about what we should do, what's right for our community?
Thank you, sir. Greg Harris, followed by Karen Molinari.
Hi, I'm Greg Harris. I'm no expert in environmental impact, but I do know that this study is flawed. It's frustrating because after spending 7 years working on this topic, most of those on the San Carlos Fields Committee, that 7 years worth of data has largely been ignored in terms of this analysis. In fact, even Parks and Rec data has been ignored. Director Weiss in the Fields Committee presented a plan to the committee. There were no objections to this plan. It said that there would be 8 teams. Once natural synthetic turf was installed, there would be 8 teams practicing on an average weekday. That's 120 kids, plus the tennis courts during rush hour traffic. At the changeover, that's 240 kids that have to move through a 15-minute period through a single-access neighborhood where fire protection for across the stadium field to the other neighboring neighborhood is required, and all these cars plowing into a parking lot that once it's full has no safe ability to turn around. You pull in there, you have no ability to turn around. So unless, if a full environmental impact report is what's required to consider all the data that the citizens of San Carlos spent so much time and energy collecting and analyzing, then I think it's obvious that a full environmental impact report is required. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Karen Molinari, followed by Michael Kunde.
Hello, Mayor and Council members. I understand tonight's meeting is really just to determine whether you're going to go on with the draft ISMND or pursue other environmental review process. But I have to say, and it's like a broken record, and I'm here yet again. This is, I think, my 6th year involved in telling you I want better notification. The first time I came here, I did feel that notification was improved to all the neighbors involved. But a Thursday email before a Monday meeting on a topic that many of you all, have seen the level of concern of our community. You had to have a meeting at the youth center because so many people are interested in this topic. There was more interest in this topic than whether our fire department was going to be funded or not. So I just don't think that 2 days is adequate notice, and I really would ask that I get a commitment from you, my city council members, that you are really going to be transparent in your governance process and that you're really going to notify people. There is an email list. There should be a notification when that draft ISMND comes out. There should be a notification 2 weeks prior to that hitting the street, telling people that they have 20 or 30 days, whatever you choose, to comment. There should be notices in all the newspapers. There should be notices at the park. There should be notices in all the libraries. This is a huge issue for our city, and you need to commit to transparent governance and let the people get involved in the public process. The other thing I just wanted to say is that we're all supposedly concerned about climate change, reducing our water usage and our carbon footprint, yet we're discussing replacing grass with plastic, which is only going to lead to a warm spot. And even the manufacturer recommends that you water the turf before and after use to keep the dust particulate down on page 81 of your IS. How much water is really going to be conserved? And even Cal Water says that within a few years, recycled water could be available to San Carlos. You wouldn't have to pump it up to Highlands. You could water all of the parks in the lower area and reduce our water consumption dramatically. That is where we should be going. That is the future of the state of California without putting more plastics on our earth. And I just have to say, as a parent, I am very concerned when what the manufacturer recommends is, I quote, individuals who use the field shall perform aggressive hand and body washing after playing on the field, and clothes that were worn on the field should be taken off inside out and washed separately. I have a pair of socks that my daughter wore last Easter at Red Morton Park when we went to their Easter egg hunt, and she played in a jumpy house on their field. Okay, her socks, just from walking around the jumpy house to go back in and around the jumpy house to go back in, are covered with little black particulate matter, little tire crumbs, okay? She's the weight of maybe 30 pounds. I'm supposed to put those in my washing machine, my energy-efficient, low-water usage washing machine, and let that just continue to affect all of my other laundry? Or am I supposed to have a separate laundry machine to wash my clothes? I mean, any manufacturer who says that that's what you should do after concerns me. How safe is this? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mullery. Michael Kunde, followed by Bonnie McClure.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity. I recently moved to San Carlos within the last 6 months, and just for context, a couple of the criteria was that I always came across as a very environmentally friendly city and constant improvement in its school system. And so it kind of surprises me a little bit that such a controversial issue would be considered under, one, something that's controversial in its environmental impact, and number two, we're under, as we all know, very, very difficult economic times. We're not sure if the state will get funded further, let alone how that will trickle down to the cities, and this is quite a substantial investment to make in an area that's very controversial, and it really doesn't have it has a very long payback. And most businesses and people themselves are focused on how do I save cash now, or use that to fund things that which San Carlos seems to have done fairly well, is keep investing that in things like education, which is much more important in the long run for our children than if it's soccer. I'm not really sure all of the history here, but if it's soccer or those types of things, would probably take a lower priority than how much more can I invest in my schools, school materials, teachers, the park within the school, et cetera. So I would just ask the council to consider those types of things, as I'm sure you are, as matters of priority, because someone from, I guess, new to the town, something outside is just surprised that, something of this nature would be under consideration given the circumstances that a lot of us are all under right now. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Bonnie McClure, followed by Jeff Grace.
I'd like to say that I hope that you will approve the motion to go with the negative impact report. Lots of people are allergic to natural grass. I happen to be one of them. And I played lots of team sports on grass, and You know, I had the runny eyes and the whole thing. So you have to remember that some things natural aren't all so good either for those people with allergies. I'd like to, I hadn't thought I'd do this, but respond to the last speaker. We have money allocated outside, not out of the city budget, for a field from the Palo Alto Medical Clinic. And I'd like to see it used for soccer because that's the only thing that it's for, is for a field. And not only soccer is played, but you play baseball, and you run, you have track. The upper field would be natural for now. I don't see that it's so hard to walk up to the upper field if you want natural grass. I used to live in San Francisco more than 50 years ago, and I was on Cabrillo. So every weekend and a lot of nights after work, our sidewalk, our curb space, was used by people that went to Golden Gate Park. We realized this because we lived by a park, and we expected that. And you choose to live by a park, that's what happens. People like to use the park, and it isn't there just for the people that live around the park. I think that's enough. I'm sorry that it's such an issue for the people that live around it. I can understand it. I have studied and tried to get reports from the environmental groups on this, and it seems that the pros and the cons come out so even that there's no report available. I'm sorry about that.
Thank you, Ms. McClure. Jeff Grace, followed by Kevin Clay.
Good evening. I'm Jeff Grace from San Carlos. As I think most of you know, or some of you know, that I've been involved with the field situation probably for the better part of the last 10 to 15 years, and I certainly would like to see something move forward. Page 3 of the staff report, under findings, it states that there is no impact that cannot be mitigated. Your San Carlos staff reports recommends that you proceed with a negative declaration. If a negative declaration expedites this process, I encourage you to move forward with a negative declaration. This project has been stalled for 2 to 3 years while City Council reviewed alternatives to this Field Citizens Committee recommendation to replace Highlands Field with synthetic turf. The consultants came up and gave a pretty good presentation on the balancing act, and it is a balancing act. It's trade-offs. Personally, I would prefer to see natural turf fields everywhere, but space prohibits us from putting in whatever it would require, probably 15 fields worth of natural turf to really accommodate the demand by the field, the programs in San Carlos that use these fields. So it is a balancing act. So given that the report shows there are no negative impacts, it cannot be mitigated, and I recommend that we move forward with the negative declaration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grace. The last speaker card I have is from Kevin Clay. If there's anyone else who would wish to speak, please fill out a card. Mr. Clay?
Good evening, gentlemen and ladies. I wasn't really preparing to speak on this, but I'm here with my 12-year-old boys, and Nick leaned over and said something that I thought I should share with you. They had been at soccer camp at Carlmont, which has a synthetic turf on the football field, and I'm sure they use it for soccer as well. I don't know what manufacturer or what it is. And Nick said, they were there in August, and Nick said it was so hot. So I think you ought to just know, maybe if you do this, or if the soccer is related to the decision, and you might want to query some soccer players to get their real attitudes on this. The other thing that kind of stuck out in my mind, I don't remember ever having a project that I've gone through the city and getting credit for on-street parking as part of the project. So I'm not sure, maybe there's something I don't know about the planning zoning ordinance, whether or not the city should be allowed to get counted for on-street parking in a project. Doesn't seem quite right, because there's been lots of projects gone through the city, commercial projects, and it's always been a strict rule. And as far as I know, through many cities that I go to, it's always a rule that you don't ever get credit for on-street parking. So I don't know why the city should get credit for on-street parking if they have a problem, if you create more density of a use, you should create a solution along with that density. I guess if I were to advise maybe a solution, take the money that you might spend on the EIR, because frankly, I think those are a waste of money. It's like a document that kind of meets the end result. Put it out to vote. Put it on the next ballot that comes around. I'm not sure when that is. Let the people vote. Save the money. Just an idea.
Mr. Clay, thank you very much. Is there, again, anyone else wishing to speak tonight? Okay. Gentlemen, it's up to us. Who would like to go first?
Well, I'll jump into the fray.
Mr. Ahmad.
Whew. This is why we get paid the big bucks.
That's right.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, a couple of points came up, and in looking at the documents, the point of contention that I still have with this document is around traffic. The folks that use the fields for soccer most heavily have not always been the most kind neighbors to those who live there. Traffic is tough. There are trash issues with kids throwing juice boxes all around the place. There is some noise. It's kind of interesting to listen at. I've happened to go by the neighborhood 9:30, 10 o'clock at night and heard some pretty interesting soccer field vocabulary getting screamed from the fields. The folks who want to use the fields ought to remember that they are guests in the neighborhood. I'd be more than happy to work with the neighborhood to see if we can get a tow company from Gilroy to work to see if we can get some of these cars out of the way. There's been discussion of money use, and that in times of economic uncertainty, why are we spending the money? To be clear, and I know this will be echoed several other times, the citizens of San Carlos have voted for various measures and for various funds. This is money that is restricted. I cannot hire police officers. We can't do anything with this except these uses. It is sitting here. It's one of the few times that we can actually get a project to move forward, but we are not pulling money from other vital city services to put AstroTurf in. As part of my background, I'm actually a material science engineer. My major was polymers. There was a comment that plastic grass contains lead. I want to state that is factually incorrect. Polyethylene and polypropylene, if you put lead, it does not polymerize. It is not a polymerization agent. It is not part of the polymer, and you can't use lead to manufacture it. Lead is part of a pigment. If you want to put it into the pigment, that is a choice, but it is not in the plastic. You can choose to paint it with food color if you really wanted to, but it might be tasty, but that's about it. There was questions about money, and that is probably the one thing that I will spend a lot of time working on. We are faced with some interesting issues related to money. There's been, so this thing went circulated around for $61,000 for maintenance. There's no backing for this document, so I don't know what it is. Vice Mayor Royce and I have been working on the Finance Committee. It's one of the few times we can look and say, yeah, we actually are going through the budget line by line. So I got to look at this and go, is this a loaded cost? Does it include gas for the lawnmowers? Does it include the water costs that, by the way, we're going to get cut back? There's some real issues here, so money is going to drive it. The last point that I will bring up, and there was a question of why should we do this? I will have some issues of where we're going to do it, but why we should do this. Water savings do mean something. If we're going to talk green, yes, we can talk about the atmosphere. Water is critical. Maintenance savings, we are going to have a very tough budget year. We are going to reduce, I will probably put forward some call for reductions in service, reductions in levels of service. Maintenance is going to take a hit, very, very likely. Finally, there is an issue of greenhouse gas reduction. there is a point, people say that grass puts out oxygen. I don't have the number with me. I'll apologize. I'll provide it and put it on my website for anybody who wants it, which talks about the amount of carbon sequestration per acre of grass per year. Ends up roughly a tenth of a ton per 10 years. If you want to do the math, grass ain't free. We still mow this stuff. Figure out how much gas we use in a lawnmower, how many times per year, multiply each gallon by 19.6 pounds of CO2 equivalents. You get a lot of junk going out. The net cost, the natural grass does not eat the stuff that it takes to maintain it. Those are the things that are in my mind. I, again, will probably bubble it up that the traffic portion and the neighborhood impacts are the things that I'm most interested in seeing addressed, and that's where I'd like to go moving forward. I yield.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Grocott, do you have comments?
Yes, I do. I think we as a council, and this is partly aimed at the public as well, I'll put it this way. I remember, 10 years ago sitting out there and not being up here. And sometimes things would happen, like environmental impact reports and so forth, and I would think, this darn council, they're just marching forward. They're approving this and, next step, and this is just going to happen. It's inevitable and so forth. Now that I sit up here and I do this, I understand that, this is just process. And we're looking at, do we do a neg deck or do we do an environmental impact report? And in fact, when we went through the Palo Alto Medical Foundation application, that's when I first realized, I'm not Greg Rubens and I'm not an attorney, so I didn't know this before. We could do an EIR and it could come out, very negative, but then we could sit up here and say, well, there's a public benefit, so we're going to ignore the EIR and we're still going to move forward. So these things, as important as they may seem, and I guess they are important, I tend to agree with the speaker, Mr. Clay, that it's a matter of process and we have to do it. That's why I mentioned to these consultants, and I guess I asked the question, this is, we're dealing with legal matters in a way, like, is it a recognized intersection or not by the county, I've forgotten the name now, but what is it? Congestion management. And these are the things that Bob and I love, these acronyms and so forth. So what I'm driving at is, my decision tonight is, do we do an EIR or do we do a negative deck? Negative deck, less time, less, it's not quite as complete, you might say, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but, you don't have to do as much, and so it costs less money. People mentioned about money tonight and our budget and so forth, and it's a reality. And I think paying for this kind of thing does come out of our general fund, if I'm not mistaken. No? Well, okay. But it's still money, and it's the public's money, and we have to spend it wisely, regardless of where it comes from. So I guess what I'm saying to my council is, staff is recommending a negative declaration. The consultants are recommending that. And that's what I'm ready to move forward with. Now, that all said, I think there were some wonderful comments made tonight. I think people have some good points to make about, do we do artificial turf in San Carlos? Do we do this project at this particular site? There's a lot of issues here, and you people came tonight and spoke on those and brought them up. And, I would say to you, don't go away. Come back. When we look at the project, should we move forward with the project? And is it viable? And is it something we should do for the community, et cetera, et cetera? That's when you should put your energy into a council meeting, similar to what, as someone mentioned, we had a meeting at the youth center. Well, maybe we have, when we do the project, yes or no, maybe we have to have that at the youth center. Lastly, I would just say to staff, I feel a little uncomfortable here because this came out on Thursday. I know in some regards it's not that big of an issue because, as I asked the consultants, will this be in either the negative deck or the EIR? But I agree with the public. We need to do always a good job of notification and getting things out, especially something like this, earlier than later. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Mr. Royce?
Well, there was comments mentioned about trying to save money. I don't think we're trying to save money. We actually spent money, a lot of money, in doing this report. To basically, the goal is to investigate and to bring to the surface, what the issues are. And meeting this evening and hearing the public talk and having been at the Fields group over the last 3 or 4 years in some of those meetings and other public meetings, I think we could all agree what the issues are. We may not agree on how to solve them, but I think everything, all the oil's on the surface. It's all there. And so whether or not we do a mitigated negative deck or a complete EIR, I think the EIR is not going to add much more incremental value to what the issues are. This report and what you know and what we know, what the experts know, will give us the right direction to publish this, to basically go through, 30 days of review, other meetings that are coming up to discuss what the issues are, not what's on the surface now, how we deal with those things. But you may, about a month ago, if you were here, you heard me talking about Devonshire Canyon and a complete environmental impact report, and I learned that the dusky-footed wood rat went from 14 nests to 56 new nests. I mean, there wasn't, to me, a lot of new information in spending a lot of money for a complete environmental impact report. I do want to make sure that all of our citizens of San Carlos, especially the neighborhood, know that everybody on council here, mostly speaking for myself too, is that we need to be really sensitive to the neighborhood there, to the park, to your homes, to your parking, to people who get out and throw a cigarette in the curb or a piece of trash from a box drink. All those things on how we do the project and what the issues are. We need to put good thought into it. But that's not what we're talking about this evening. What we're talking about this evening is the process itself. And I think we have enough information and a good recommendation from staff to proceed this evening with the negative deck. Thank you.
Okay. My fellow council members have pretty much covered most of the items that I would have, I think, said. I've been on the council coming in now to my 4th year, and I was, along with Mr. Grocott and Mr. Lewis, who isn't here this evening, sat in the youth center with for the first large group that we had, and a lot of those concerns are still with us. The concerns are listed in this tome that we have. I agree with Mr. Royce, I think that, and I think Mr. Grocott, that going to a full environmental impact report is just going to have a larger document, but not necessarily anything different than any of us have brought up. The neighborhood concerns, I think, as someone mentioned before, a lot of it is societal to the fact that there's a park there, and there's folks that live close to the park. And I know from the report that numerically there's 96 parking spaces. And I know from fact, because I've driven by there and driven in there, is that many of those spaces are not used for reasons given tonight by the public and by ourselves. I think we need to do a better job of sort of policing ourselves in a lot of the things that we do, not just in that area. I also agree with the comment that perhaps the timing on this could have been a bit longer, and I will recommend, depending on how we vote tonight, that the next report that we have will, if it comes out on a Thursday, we will not be hearing it on a Monday. We will be hearing it on the 2-week notice or 2 weeks beyond that to make sure that any folks that want to make sure that they're lined up to speak. Again, as Mr. Grocott said, however, this is part of a process. If we vote for a mitigated negative declaration or if we vote for a full EIR, this doesn't mean the project is going to happen. It doesn't mean that this thing is going to start tomorrow. We have to go through the process. This is that. As Mr. Ahmad said, the monies that are going to be used to either improve that field in grass or put artificial surface on it come from special funds. They are not coming out of the general fund. They can't be used for anything else. They have to be used for fields and park and recreation. So I want to make sure everybody understands all that. I'm willing tonight to entertain a motion to approve the report by staff to proceed with a mitigated negative declaration, to get this process going, and to see where it will lead us.
Mr. Mayor, just a question. Because we are dealing with legal terms, I thought, could we get a definition, what does or what is a mitigated negative declaration? What is it?
Okay. Mr. Morrow, Mr. Rubens, one of the staff people.
Well, actually, I have it turned to the page of my CEQA book here. It's Public Resources Code, Section 21064.5. I'm quoting, a mitigated negative declaration means a negative declaration prepared for the project when the initial study has identified potentially significant effects on the environment, but the revisions to the project plans or proposals made by or agreed to by the applicant in the proposed negative declaration and initial study are released for public review would avoid the effects or mitigate the effects to a point where no clearly significant effect on the environment would occur. So what that means in simple terms is you do a mitigated negative declaration after the initial study shows that all significant or potentially significant effects can be mitigated by the measures in the mitigated negative declaration that are subject to the environmental review. You do an EIR, the next level of review, when there are significant impacts that can't be mitigated in a mitigated negative declaration or through mitigation measures, excuse me. And the categorical exemptions in the lower level of review, which some cities have followed that route in putting in artificial turf fields. That's where you just do the initial study and you don't have any mitigation measures.
I was going to answer your question. Okay.
It was also for.
I guess through the chair, two things I would add. First is that, and it was in the staff report, but I think it's worth amplifying, is that we did do a study of neighboring agencies, and what we found is that what is proposed tonight, a so-called mitigated negative deck, is actually 2 stages above what we've seen in other communities. Putting in an artificial turf surface is generally what's called a categorically exempt activity, which is exempt from any environmental review. What we're talking about tonight is going 2 steps above that, not only doing a negative deck, but doing a mitigated negative deck. And if you look at page 4 of the staff report, you'll see 10 areas where we are enhancing the negative deck with mitigations. So I think that's also important to put on the record that we are taking a higher level of environmental review than our neighbors in 2 different regards.
Okay. Gentlemen? Mr. Grocott?
Yes, I have a question. Would this be required? There's been a lot of emphasis tonight on artificial turf. And Mr. Crone presented us with something that, Mr. Ahmad said would need more study, but by appearances, another option is do a project, just don't do it with artificial turf. Do it with natural turf. So if we were looking at that, and I don't know, have we made a decision necessarily that we're going to do artificial turf? Or could we still decide, well, we're going to, we've looked at, perhaps on a parallel route, we've looked at these numbers, and we've decided, what, we're not going to do artificial turf. We're going to do a project. We're going to improve the park, but we're going to do it with natural turf.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Rubens. We can do anything. We can do artificial turf. We can do whatever. It's not to that point yet, but at the end of the day, we can make any decision.
So the question, though, is it required that we do? Was it required that we do this initial study? Is it required that we do a neg deck or a EIR if we were going to be choosing to do natural turf and not install artificial?
I think the natural turf, I might defer to staff, but the natural turf is not, would be exempt, would be putting in natural turf because you would, clearly exempt because it's an existing facility. You're not changing the facility at all. That's one of the exemptions that would probably be available. You haven't made the decision. It's a fairly early stage in the review process. What you're doing tonight is reviewing a draft initial study that is, and making the decision that that staff normally would make. You're making a decision that staff would normally make as far as pursuing the mitigated negative deck or an EIR. Staff normally makes that before you see the project. Staff's having you take a look at that to make the decision what direction to go, because it's such an important decision in the city, in part, and because they want to make sure that the process is followed and the city is protected in that process. So you're really early, and there was a point made early about review and seeing the initial study. When you go to the mitigated negative declaration, there's going to be a minimum 20-day review of the mitigated negative declaration. That's going to be reviewed at the time of the project. So when you see the project, you're going to see the mitigated negative deck. You'll see the whole thing. The public will have an opportunity, whatever time you want to set, but there's a minimum of 20 days to review the mitigated negative declaration.
So, Mr. Mayor, as I think about this, I realize I'm actually reluctant to move forward on doing either a neg deck or an EIR because they both cost money. And when I consider what Mr. Crone brought us tonight, if there's any truth in these numbers, for example, we could, if you look at the upper field, I've walked the upper field, I'm sure we've all been up there. That was done by volunteers shortly after the city got access to the site. And it was very nice that volunteers did that, but it wasn't done properly. The underlayment is lousy, and there's sinking and so forth going on, which is why the field is so uneven. Looking at these numbers, potentially, if we didn't do artificial turf, I don't know, potentially we could do 2 fields and really make some improvements to the park. I would like to know more about that before moving forward with either an EIR or a neg deck on it, because that is queuing up the ball for artificial turf.
Okay. Through the chair, Mr. Grocott, I would agree. I'm going to look at this. My issue and real interest is primarily around the finances. I don't believe these numbers, but I am perfectly happy and will work with the vice mayor on the finance committee to go through them. We are going to make a financial decision at the end of the day, but I am interested in moving forward with the study such that we can actually say that the issues of artificial turf as a potential way to go are understood, fleshed out, the issues in the neighborhood are well understood, can or cannot be mitigated, and what's it going to cost. I'd rather have that information in front of us to make a decision as opposed to saying, I don't want to do anything and then run the numbers. I think we can go simultaneously.
Okay. I'd like to hear a motion, if there is a motion on the floor, or a motion that someone would like to make.
I'd like to make a motion, because that's what we're here to do, is to do a negative deck or a mitigated negative deck or a EIR. And so I will make a motion to proceed with a mitigated negative declaration for the preparation of the Highlands Park Lower Athletic Field Turf Replacement Project.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second it. I would like to discuss an item further that Mr. Ahmad brought up.
It's been moved and seconded. We'll have some more further discussion. Mr. Grocott.
I think then, for me to feel comfortable moving forward with this part of the process, I would take you up on what you said, and not necessarily, it doesn't have to be council. I don't think it's it's fine if council is involved, but people that know numbers and so forth. But I would like staff to look at this type of thing so that when we get the environmental report and we're sitting there ready to say, okay, we can look at artificial turf, we also are prepared to say, you know what, we're ready to look at natural grass, and we may be ready to look at 2 fields as opposed to 1. And so if we're going to start this process, I want this one running parallel, and I want them to meet at an intersection where we can make a decision.
Yeah, Mr. Grocott, I would support that. I would also, I had spoken to Mr. Moore previously that I would also like to have, as part of the financial analysis, a discussion of replacement cost and what it means for fees to either soccer teams or what it means. What's going to happen with Measure G? Is it going to be alive? Is it going to die? What are we supposed to do? How are we going to pay for this thing?
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Any further discussion? Second also. Been seconded by Mr. Motion by Mr. Royce, seconded by Mr. Grocott. Any further discussion on this item? Does staff understand what we're about here, and especially on the financial comments from Mr. Grocott? And actually, all of us, I think, would agree to that.
Yeah, I guess, Mr. Mayor, through the chair, I did talk earlier to Councilmember Ahmad, and as some of you probably know, when this issue, both at this site and other sites, came forward, we've previously given prior councils estimates for both artificial surface and natural grass. We could certainly do so here. I would also point out as a data point, I don't want you to get too far afield, so to speak, here, but I should point out that, for example, when we did both L'Oreal and Burton Park, which were our last two grass fields, each of them cost over $1 million apiece, and that was a number of years ago. So one would imagine that the costs would probably be in that area or higher, just as a point of reference.
Well, I think the point is, as evidenced by a lot of these reports that we were given tonight, each day more information comes out. And certainly with dollars and cents, we just want to bring it up to 2009 standard.
We'd be happy to do that.
Okay. Call the question then. Any other comments? All right. Ms. Boland?
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Mayor Grisilli?
Yes. Again, thank you all for coming out. And again, this is a step in the process. So thank you. We have a couple more items. I'll wait a couple of seconds for folks to get settled. Would you give this to Christine, please? Thank you.
Where's it? Thank you, sir.
So what changed?
Okay, I'd like to get started here on our next item, which is item 11, new business, item 11A, consideration of appointments to council subcommittees and ad hoc committees for 2009. I guess I can lead this. We had every year we set up assignments for our council on different groups, and we set up who can hopefully choose to participate in these. I guess we might as well just go down them fairly quickly and just see if we want to change any of these. The first one we have is advanced life support, and right now it's Mr. Grocott and myself as the backup. Are you, Mr. Grocott, are you still good with that? Okay. And if anyone wants to move in on any of this, please, Mr. Royce or Mr. Ahmad, please jump in, or Mr. Grocott. Airport Land Use Committee, Mr. Ahmad, backed up by myself.
I enjoy it.
Okay, great. Airport Roundtable, the same two people? Okay.
I have a question on that. Being that you're now the mayor and you have other duties as mayor that take up your time, and I was the Airport Roundtable person before, if it would be any help to you, I would not mind for this year at least being the backup to Mr. Ahmad, as long as Mr. Ahmad most of the time attends.
Okay, that'd be fine, Mr. Grocott. I don't mind giving up this because I've got a couple of others here that I think I'm going to take off. So, Ms. Boland, do you have that? Okay. Association of Bay Area Governments, Mr. Lewis and Mr. Ahmad. I think Mr. Lewis is comfortable with doing that since it meets twice a year. Hopefully you can squeeze it into his schedule. We have some other council of government items, City and County Association of Governments. Myself was the primary and Mr. Lewis was the backup. I think Mr. Lewis would like to drop off of that, and
I'd be happy to.
Mr. Ahmad would be interested in doing it. And just to let the council know, what I'm planning on doing on this one, and also when we get down to the fire board, is I would like to, we're not going to alternate attending these meetings per se, but I want to make sure that the backups on some of these, and maybe we might all look at this, if they meet approximately once a month. Now, some of these meet twice a year, whatever, that's not practical. But if they meet once a month, that we might want to integrate the associate in so that the person doesn't show up and just cold, doesn't know how it works or what's going on or who some of the other folks on. So just a suggestion that we might have. So CCAG would be myself again and Mr. Ahmad. You have that, Ms. Boland? Okay. CCAG's Congestion Management and Air Quality, Mr. Grocott, Mr. Ahmad. Does that still work?
I'm not doing anything. That's
Well, I know, but we're coming to you. Don't worry. CCAG's Regional Housing Needs Assessment, Mr. Royce. There you go. And myself backup. That works. City and School District 2+2, Mr. Lewis and Mr. Royce. I think Mr. Lewis would continue on that as well as yourself. Council of Cities, we're all invited to that. I know the mayor goes to those, and I intend to attend as many of those as I can, and Mr. Royce hopefully can back me up. But again, we're all invited to those Council of Cities situations. City Selection Committee, same thing. If I'm not able to, and I will check every month, I will diligently check every month to make sure if there's any vote at all that we have a designee to go to that to represent San Carlos. Emergency Services Council, Mr. Grocott and myself. Mr. Grocott, you're still comfortable with that?
Yes.
Okay. Housing and Regional Trust, Mr. Royce.
Sure. So I just got appointed to the board, not the membership agency, but
Okay.
the board for Hart.
Okay. That's good. That's right. I forgot to mention that. Library Governing Board, JPA. You still comfortable doing that, Mr. Royce?
Very much so
Okay.
with their new, director coming on board here.
Okay, and at 8 o'clock on Monday, I could actually back you up. 8 o'clock. Good. The next one would be the San Mateo County Convention and Visitors Bureau. That is there's really not too many meetings, but I attend some of their events, and I'm happy to
lunches.
And I don't get anything for free, but continually, I'd be happy to continue on that and keep Mr. Lewis as a backup. Sister City Association, Mr. Royce, are you still comfortable doing that? South Bayside System Authority, I'm comfortable doing that, continuing with that. And again, as I spoke before, Mr. Royce, if he's comfortable being a backup, I want to make sure that we get him into that so that there's more than one person on the council that knows what's going on in those.
Probably attend a meeting or two.
Yeah, I was hopeful.
With you over the next 6
That'll
months.
be great. That'll be great. Okay? We're getting all these, Ms. Boland. I hope I'm not going too fast for you. Belmont San Carlos Fire Department, Mr. Grocott and myself. I would also like to propose perhaps that Councilmember Royce be like a third person there, and perhaps, again, having you go to some other meetings, but attending a few of those meetings so that if one of us cannot attend, Mr. Royce is up to date. Mr. Grocott, do you agree with?
I think that's fine.
Is that all right with you, Mr. Ahmad? So we have like a third person. Peninsula Congestion Relief Alliance, Mr. Ahmad, backed up by Mr. Lewis. Does that work out? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I think you skipped Ed Foundation on page 1.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I? I apologize. Where is that?
You have that, San Carlos Educational Foundation?
Oh, yeah.
The bottom.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did. I apologize.
Lewis?
And Mr. Lewis.
So can I make a comment on that? Can we fold that as a subset of the 2+2? Since it is Educational Foundation schools, and there are discussions that come up at our 2+2 meetings. Is it a separate group or board that he attends?
I don't know.
Or what?
I don't know that he might be just the liaison.
That's really under the other category, but that's really a discretionary.
Why don't you do this? Why don't you talk to Mr. Lewis?
Okay.
And when he comes back, and
if
and we'll put a slash and put your name there too.
Well, worst case, it'll be either him or it'll go to 2+2, which is he and I.
Right. No, that's fine.
Okay.
I think we should have backups on some of these that possibly meet.
Okay.
That's a good idea.
Christine?
Belmont San Carlos Fire Board. Okay. Peninsula, we did that. Consent. So now we have other. And there's a number of other committees and subcommittees and things that we work on. Harbor Industrial Association, Mr. Ahmad, Mr. Royce. Grand Boulevard Task Force, Mr. Grocott and Mr. Ahmad. League of California Cities, I would be happy to represent us in that as a liaison to that.
I'm happy to back you up if you
And okay, why don't we put Mr. Ahmad as a backup for that? I have attended a couple of the conventions, or at least one of the conventions, and gone to some of their meetings. We have a subcommittee for the Samtrans Transit Village of Mr. Grocott and myself, which we're willing to continue, at least I am. San Carlos Green, Mr. Ahmad. San Carlos Together, Mr. Royce. And we have some ad hoc council subcommittees, the Finance Subcommittee, which is right now Mr. Ahmad, Mr. Royce, and Mr. Galvin. Wheeler Plaza Study Group, which would be myself and Mr. Royce. Revenue Subcommittee, which would be myself and Mr. Lewis. Economic Development, again, myself and Mr. Lewis.
Do you have enough time for all those? Are
Yeah,
you
I do.
okay with that?
I do. I do have
Good.
that. I do, actually. And because they don't meet on a periodic basis, they meet, or I shouldn't say they meet on a regular basis, they meet periodically. City attorney selection, I think this can be eliminated.
That's done.
Because I think we have a city attorney, so why don't we eliminate that one, if that's okay?
We made him nervous for 5 minutes.
I think we can do without that one. And then we have council members assigned as liaisons to council forum committees. And Mr. Lewis would be Park and Rec. Myself to the Youth Advisory Council. Councilmember Ahmad to the Economic Development Advisory Commission. Mr. Grocott to the Traffic and Circulation and the GPAC, which I guess BPAC is involved in that, or is that a separate one? We don't even have BPAC on here.
BPAC is the general
General plan, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and that's
I'm
still
sorry.
going on.
Okay.
Won't be for long, but.
Okay,
should
and
be
then
managed.
Councilmember Royce, Arts and Culture and Planning Commission. Have I missed any?
I have just a question on the two subcommittees that, you're on a lot of subcommittees, as is Brad, and I'm just curious with his schedule, is he fine with all of those?
Yeah,
You've talked to him?
I talked to him, and he didn't necessarily, again, these meet periodically.
Yeah.
So I think he's able to squeeze these into, we try to schedule this to his schedule, quite honestly.
Because I could I'm suggesting I could step up if
No, I appreciate it.
if you
Yeah,
want.
but I think especially the Revenue Subcommittee and Economic Development Committee are sort of linked in a way.
Right.
And, I've spoken to him, and there may be a situation later on in the year we may have to adjust these. I know we normally don't do that, but that's why I'm hopeful that at least if we have two on every one, we'll have some coverage.
Right.
So.
Okay.
Okay. Do I need to make a motion? Is there a motion needed on this, or do I just, as appoint city council members to one or more boards, committees, or authorities?
Mayor's discretion.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Mr. Weiss.
Historically, the city has, by practice, had the council by motion ratify the
Okay.
recommendations of the mayor.
Good. Do I hear a motion for the assignments?
I would like to make a motion to approve the mayor's recommendations on the assignments of council committees.
I'll second that.
All right. Moved and seconded. Any more discussion? Ms. Bowman?
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Mayor Grisilli?
Yes. Okay, thank you, gentlemen. We have our assignments, as they say. That's 11A. We go to 11B, consideration of adopting resolution of intention to amend the City of San Carlos PERS miscellaneous retirement contract to provide 2.5% at 55 formula for local miscellaneous members, and introducing an ordinance authorizing an amendment to the contract between the City of San Carlos and the Board of Administration of the California Public Employee Retirement System. Mr. Maltby.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of City Council. Jeff Maltby, Administrative Services Director. I think the title kind of says it all, but I do need to add a little bit PERS regulations to cover us on the implementation of this item. This is a follow-up item to the MOUs that have been negotiated. Memorandum of Understanding, the labor contracts that have been negotiated with the miscellaneous employee, 2 AFSCME units, Teamsters unit, the confidential unit, and the management unit, to tier the city's retirement system from 2.7% at 55 as it currently exists to 2.5% at 55 for new hires January 1st, or actually when this amendment goes into effect and the system actually exists. I'm required by PERS to tell you that the city currently contributes 17.944% of an employee's reportable compensation for the miscellaneous members' retirement benefit under the current system of 2.7% at 55. Under the 2.5% at 55 tier that's being put into effect, the city will contribute a rate will be 10.262% of the reportable earnings for local miscellaneous members entering the membership of the first time in the miscellaneous classification after the effective date of this amendment to the contract. This will come back for a second reading at the first meeting in February on the consent calendar. And based on the timeline we have right now for the meeting agendas tonight, assuming that the council adopts the resolution and the ordinance and continues to adopt it at the second reading, the second tier will go into effect March 16th. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for Mr. Malpe? Mr. Grocott?
I have just one, and I seem to remember this from when we did this at Fire, but help me out. These percentages that you just mentioned, the 17 and the 10, those can fluctuate depending on investments of the PERS program, correct?
Right, based on whatever rates PERS gives the city, and they can go up and they can also go down. But as they stand today together, those are the rates.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move for the adoption of resolution number 2009-1?
No.
Oh.
4.
Really? Resolution of intent to approve an amendment to contract between Board of Administration, California Public Employees Retirement System, and the City Council, City of San Carlos.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the resolution. Any more discussion? Hearing none, could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Mayor Grisilli?
Yes. Just one motion tonight? Do I have to make a motion on
I
it?
just wanted to make it clear that you were both adopting the resolution and introducing the ordinance.
Ordinance, and introduce, that's what I was going to ask you, and introducing the ordinance, or should we do it separately?
I don't think you read, the ordinance needs to be read. The red title.
Why don't we-
The title needs to be read.
Why don't we just do it anyway? What the heck? We'll just have another motion. We love motions.
All right, Mr. Mayor, I move to introduce ordinance number
1406.
an ordinance of the City Council of the City of San Carlos authorizing an amendment to the contract between the City Council of the City of San Carlos and the Board of Administration of the California Public Employees Retirement System.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the ordinance. Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Mayor Grisilli?
Yes. And I believe there is nothing else, so we will be adjourned.
9:25.